Hello, my beautiful lingering light family. I am so glad you have found your way here today. Let me ask you this. Are you discovering the hidden miracles in your day, or are you simply looking in the mirror and mourning the sunset of your life? If we see these years as nothing more than a quiet fade into the background, we are going to miss the most spectacular bloom of our entire lives. There is no greater loss than allowing your most seasoned years to go to waste simply because you forgot how to see the light. Many of us feel that aging is simply a slow process of being forgotten. Our children are busy, our bodies are changing, and sometimes the silence in the house feels heavier than any noise ever did. Without a shift in perspective, those years can become a cold and lonely weight. I am walking this journey right beside you, and I know exactly how deep that hollow ache can feel. But take heart. In the words of Khalil Gibran, we will find the secret to transforming that emptiness into a magnificent miracle. This message will change the way you see yourself forever, so please stay with me until the very end. At 74, Margaret considered herself a master of the solitary arts. She had perfected the rhythm of a house that held only one person. She knew exactly how to stretch a Sunday roast into 3 distinct, respectable meals. She knew the precise corner of the everything drawer where the spare rubber bands and the AA batteries lived. She had even conquered the modern world's greatest foe. She could reset her blinking Wi-Fi router without a hint of the panic that used to seize her. She was independent, she was organized, and she was safe. But as Gibran reminds us, we are far more than our checklists and our routines. What Margaret hadn't mastered, what none of us truly master, was the ringing, heavy volume of loneliness. After Tom passed away 5 years ago, the silence in her hallway wasn't just a lack of noise, it was a physical presence. It sat at the dinner table with her, it followed her up the stairs. She started leaving the television on from dawn until dusk, not because she cared about the news or the soap operas, but because the hum of human voices acted like a thin blanket against the cold emptiness of the rooms. She would often sit in Tom's favorite old leather recliner, her fingers tracing the worn, cracked armrest where his hand had rested for decades. 50 years of marriage doesn't just leave marks on the furniture, it carves deep, permanent canyons into the soul. Then, quite unexpectedly, came James. She met him in the new releases section of the library, of all places. She wasn't looking for a late-life romance, she was just looking for a good mystery novel to get her through the weekend. But James made a silly, self-deprecating joke about the font size on a book cover, and Margaret felt a spark of laughter in her chest that she hadn't felt in years. It was like a long-dormant seed finally catching a drop of rain. When he offered to carry her stack of books to her car, Margaret's first instinct was to pull back. "I've got it, thank you. I'm quite capable," she started to say. She had been independent for so long. Accepting help felt like letting a crack appear in her armor. But then, Gibran's voice whispered in her mind, "When love beckons to you, follow him, though his ways are hard and steep." She realized then that her independence was actually a fortress built out of fear. She was afraid to be vulnerable again. She had already buried the love of her life, could she really survive that kind of tearing of the heart a second time? Gibran doesn't offer easy comfort, he offers the truth. Let yourself fall for someone completely, even if there's a chance you'll get your heart broken. Margaret looked at James and realized that avoiding love wouldn't protect her from pain, it would only protect her from joy. And she hadn't survived 7 decades of life just to spend her remaining years living half-heartedly. As they grew closer, their love wasn't the fiery, dramatic whirlwind of youth. It was something better. It was spacious. He remembered that she liked her coffee with just a splash of almond milk. She saved him the corner of the brownie pan because she knew he loved the crunchy bits. He listened when she talked about Tom, and she didn't feel a single ounce of guilt for mentioning her late husband. As Gibran taught her, love isn't a replacement, it is a magnificent expansion of the heart. They weren't trying to own each other, they were simply being free together. Margaret even joked, "James, I love you dearly, but I also love sleeping diagonally across my entire king-sized bed." To which James replied, "Margaret, that might be the most romantic thing I've ever heard." Of course, life in our 70s isn't just about newfound smiles. It comes with a weight. When James had a sudden health scare a few months into their relationship, Margaret felt a familiar, icy dread settle in her bones. Sitting in that sterile hospital room, watching the green line of the monitor beep, 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 she was transported back in time. Grief has an incredibly long and vivid memory. It took her right back to the smell of antiseptic and the feeling of Tom's cooling hand in hers. In that moment, she felt a wave of guilt. How can I be doing this again? She wondered. Is it fair to Tom? Is it fair to my own heart? But Gibran's wisdom anchored her. Your joy is your sorrow unmasked. The selfsame well from which your laughter rises was oftentimes filled with your tears. He tells us that joy and sorrow are roommates. They aren't enemies, they are the two sides of the same breath. When joy is sitting at your dinner table, remember that sorrow is just taking a nap in the guest room. Margaret found herself in the hospital cafeteria, nursing a cup of lukewarm, cardboard-tasting coffee, when she suddenly remembered James's terrible attempt at a downward dog yoga pose in her living room. He had groaned, I bend, therefore I am. She let out a sudden bark of laughter in that quiet cafeteria, and then immediately felt ashamed. But then she understood, the joy she felt with James was only possible because she had known such deep sorrow. The sorrow had carved a giant canyon in her heart, and now that canyon was capable of holding an enormous amount of new joy. Gibran explains that the deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. When you are happy, look deep into your heart and you shall find it is only that which has given you sorrow that is giving you joy. She realized she wasn't crying because life was cruel, she was crying because life was so beautiful that it was worth the risk of losing. That distinction changed everything for her. Now, let's be honest with each other, friends. Aging isn't all sunsets and poetry. Margaret's arthritis didn't ask for an invitation, it simply broke down the door and moved into her knuckles. There were rainy mornings when her hands felt like they were made of rusted iron and broken glass. Simple tasks, like buttoning a favorite silk blouse or wrestling with a stubborn pickle jar, became strategic operations that required a three-step plan and an immense amount of patience. One morning, she sat at her kitchen table, glaring at a jar of salsa she couldn't open, and she whispered to the empty room, I really don't like this version of me. We've all been there, haven't we? Feeling betrayed by the very body that has carried us so far. But Gibran offers a perspective that is both sobering and strangely hopeful. Your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. He compares it to the stone of a fruit. The stone must break so that its heart may stand in the sun. Margaret realized that her physical pain was slowing her down, but in that slowness, she was noticing things she had missed for decades. She was more patient with the slow clerk at the pharmacy because she knew what it felt like to have hands that didn't work. She was more compassionate with her neighbor's irritability because she knew what it felt like to be in a body that ached. Now, a quick but very important reminder from your friend here at Lingering Light, if you are in persistent pain, please do not just grin and bear it. You must consult with your doctor or a healthcare professional. This wisdom is meant to help your spirit cope, but your body deserves expert care. Research shows that a positive, accepting attitude toward our limitations can lower stress hormones and actually help us manage chronic conditions more effectively. Margaret began to view her pain not as a punishment for the crime of aging, but as a bitter medicine that was healing the parts of her that were trapped in pride or a false sense of invincibility. She stopped competing with the 40-year-old Margaret who could run miles. She began to love the 74-year-old Margaret who could sit still and find a small miracle in the way a single beam of dust-mote-filled sunlight hit the kitchen floor. As Gibran says, if you could keep your heart in wonder at the daily miracles of your life, your pain would not seem less wondrous than your joy. One evening, after James was safely back home and fully recovered, they sat on her back porch watching the sunset. The sky was doing that incredible thing it does in the autumn of the year, shifting from a brilliant, fiery gold to a soft, bruised rose, and then finally into a deep, regal violet. Margaret looked at her gnarled hands, then at James, then out at the horizon. She realized something quietly miraculous: every tear she had ever shed for Tom, every moment of fear in the hospital, every sharp pang of arthritis, and every belly laugh she had shared with James, it was all one thing. It was her life. And it was absolutely beautiful. Nothing had been wasted. Not the grief, not the fear, not even the aching joints. Love had enlarged her. Sorrow had deepened her. Pain had cracked her open so the light could get in. She turned to James and said, "You know, if life is supposed to be a teacher, I think she gives a few too many pop quizzes for my liking." James laughed, squeezed her hand, and said, "True, but imagine how boring the class would be if we already knew all the answers." My dear friends, if you are sitting there tonight wondering if your best days are a fading light, I want you to look at Margaret. At 74, she was brave enough to love again. At 78, she was strong enough to endure. With hands that ached, she still held on to the beauty of the world. Your life is not a candle flickering out in the wind. It is a lantern, weathered by the storm, yes, but glowing with a seasoned, steady flame that no young person could ever hope to match. Before you lay your head down tonight, I want you to repeat these 5 truths to yourself. My heart is not a cup that gets full, it is a garden that can always grow more love. Joy and sorrow are my roommates, I will set a place for both at my table. My pain is a teacher, cracking the shell of my heart so I can finally see the big picture. Accepting help is not a sign of weakness, it is a bridge to connection. Nothing in my long life has been wasted, every wrinkle is a map of a miracle I survived. May your heart remain wide open to the road work ahead. May you find balance in the sway of the trees and the rhythm of your own breath. And may your light, that beautiful, human, seasoned, lingering light, shine brightly for all to see. I want to hear from you tonight. What is one small miracle you noticed today? Maybe it was a perfect cup of coffee, a phone call from a friend, or just the way the light hit your curtains. Share it with us in the comments. Your stories are the fuel for this channel. And if this message touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our Lingering Light family. It helps our circle of light grow a little wider every single day. Thank you. I'll see you in the next one.